If you missed the early released edition of Looking Ahead, where we predicted what might happen between Pentala Harikrishna and Hikaru Nakamura, that is a you problem. Go find it. It's somewhere on the web. In this episode, we're going to talk about how Magnus Carlsen finally defended home turf and won the Altibox Norway Chess Super Tournament. Garry Kasparov surprised everyone with his incredible performance at the Ultimate Blitz in St. Louis. And of course, it's that time of the month where we take a look back to the best and worst moments from the month of April. Ancient Chinese medicine tells us it's not healthy for your spleen to watch TV and eat at the same time. So put away the cereal. It's ChessCenter.
Well, Danny, let's start this Chess Center off with a major surprise. We have the return of the greatest chess player of all time, Garry Kasparov, playing a blitz match in St. Louis against 3 of the top 10 players in the world against the 3 best U.S. players.
Well, I'd name it Return of the King, but he didn't actually win the event, and Peter Jackson might sue me. Although, does he really own the rights to that? Doesn't Tolkien own the rights? Anyway, long story short, what you're saying is true. Kasparov impressed everyone. I enjoyed watching every single game that he played. Even when he blundered, he was humble. He made fun of himself, and really, he delivered. Overall, I was just super impressed. He beat every single one of the players there, and just played some awesome chess. Who knew he still had it in him, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to say that I called it, although there's a lot of people around who are skeptical. I think on Gary's part, funny enough, I think he was underprepared. He had the beautiful Scotch game that he was getting great positions against his opponents, and they adapted in game 2, and he didn't have another go-to opening.
Well, you're right, and the skeptical folk, I did point to myself when you said that. I was among them. I didn't think he really had it to hold his weight there, but he did just that and donated all of his winnings to the U.S. Olympiad team, that being $10,000 in cash, coming in third place behind Nakamura and So. Caruana not having his best performance after winning the U.S. Championship. But for those of you who missed it, try to check out some replays of it. Read our full report at Chess.com/news because it was awesome. Garry, we salute you, and we were glad to have you back, and you surprised us all. Now, before we move on completely from this amazing and surprising performance from the 13th world champion, I have to let my partner go, just so my pride doesn't have to hurt too bad and I don't have to hear it from Sean when I say that I agree with Hikaru Nakamura's tweet here. Caspi, you are the boss. You are still the boss, and we know that. We know that. Maybe you don't think we know that. Do you think we know that?
Thank you.
No, Garry. Thank you. We welcome in the man with the plan from Amsterdam to bring us updates on all the biggest news stories. Peter, let's start in Norway, where Magnus Carlsen finally defends his home turf.
Hi, Danny. Yeah, that is, of course, the biggest story of the past week. Magnus Carlsen finally winning the tournament in Norway. He did it on his 4th attempt after Karjakin won it twice and Topalov last year. And, well, we left the tournament after the last rest day, 3 more rounds to go. And Magnus, after that rest day, defeated Vladimir Kramnik in a crushing style, actually, using a novelty by his second John Ludwig hammer from one of the World Championship matches. And then the next day, well, actually the opposite happened, a very surprising turn of events, because it was Levon Aronian who defeated Magnus in a game where, the world champion really didn't have a chance. So Aronian and Carlsen were then still tied for first place with 1 round to go. And well, Aronian drew his last round game, but Carlsen won. He was just winning another good white game against Pavel Ulyanov. Mostly his white games went very well. His black games not so well. And it actually meant that Carlsen wasn't too happy with this victory. Well, he was, of course, happy with the victory, but not too happy with his play, as we can see in the video that follows.
I don't think I played brilliantly this year, but fortunately nobody else scored +3. That's about as much as I can say. And it was an unusual tournament for me in that I scored so much better with white than with black, and got so many good positions from the opening with white, which sort of saved me here, because I don't think my play in general was very inspired.
Well, not very happy with his play or not. He did win. Maybe he wasn't brilliant, but he got the job done. I'm sure he must be happy. And where is Magnus off to next after this?
Yeah, well, after a bit of a period of holiday this month, in June, the next event for the World Champion is up. Those are two side-by-side events by the Grand Chess Tour, the Rabbit and Blitz events, which will be held in first in Paris and then in Leuven, a place close to Brussels in Belgium. And those, brand new tour events added to the Grand Chess Tour. Carlsen will be there. And then the month after that, Carlsen will actually be playing in Bilbao. The tournament is holding its event a few months earlier this year, also with the world champion.
Well, of course, everyone should mark their calendars for the fact that somewhere in between there, Magnus Carlsen will be playing on our site in his Grandmaster Blitz Battle match, depending on who qualifies against him. We're excited to see that. Speaking of excited to see play from world champions, everybody was following Kasparov's return in St. Louis. Let's change gears here and talk about what the 13th world champion delivered for us, both good and bad, with his play on the board in St. Louis.
Yeah, that was an amazing event. I had to postpone writing my Norway reports because I just had to see Garry at the board again. I was watching it live from Norway, and Garry was the old Garry. Everything was back. The look at his opponents, the watch on the table, the Scotch opening, the King's Indian defense, and even taking back moves, because that was a bit of a controversy, of course. He let go of a knight and then grabbed it again and made a different move against Hikaru Nakamura. Maybe the only one he could have done it against.
Right. Well, who is Hikaru to judge, I guess, being involved in some similar controversies recently himself, though he did let Kasparov take it back, I guess, in the spirit of the event. How did the event shape out with all the players and in the final standings?
Yeah, well, on the first day, I must say, as an old fan, Garry did show the best chess, I think, of all three players, which is amazing because the other three players, Wesley So, Fabiano Caruana, and Hikaru Nakamura, are all top 10 players. First time Garry played such players since his retirement in 2005. Garry showed fantastic chess on the first day, but because he also blundered 3 times, big time, he wasn't leading the event. And after the second day, things were a bit back to normal, especially Wesley So and Nakamura. They played better chess than they did on the first day, and especially So did very well against Garry. So moved up to second place. Hikaru actually won the event and the 20K first prize. So won 15K. Garry eventually finished third and won $10,000, which he is actually donating to the US Olympia team. And the only player who didn't really play well on both days was Fabiano Caruana, the reigning US champion. He went home with another 5K added to his earlier prizes.
Yeah, well, pretty good paydays for an event that some players said they weren't even sure they were taking that seriously. But we love when St. Louis organizes things like this. I loved seeing Kasparov back, agreed with every word you said, and wish you the best of luck on your jog. I don't know if you're getting ready to run across that bridge there, but you look good in that hoodie. And thanks for joining us. We will see you next week for Featured News.
Okay, see you next week.
It's getting hot in her, so keep on pushing pawns. I am gonna sack my queen, and my name is Li Chiao. Robert, explain to everybody the song coming out of my mouth.
Well, at the Altibox Norway chess event, Li Chiao with the black pieces did a nice queen sacrifice against Pavel Yanov. Here, the move e2 by black, trying to get another young lady. After rook takes e5, rook takes e5, white is forced to start delivering some checks because it can't stop the e-pawn by itself. And after queen a8, king f7, queen a7 check was the wrong choice. White should have gone queen b7 check, using the light squares to create a perpetual check. Instead, in the game, we saw that after queen to a7 check, the rook still went back to block on e7, the queen came to f2, king e8, no more checks. The queen is forced to block the pawn, and now it's too little too late. The g-pawn starts running down the board, and the white king, unfortunately for white, is not close enough because the white queen cannot take on g3 when the pawn was there because the e-pawn would have queened. And so here, white has nothing better than to go c3 and try to start pushing the queen side. But the second move of the week, rook e6, phenomenal move, forcing b4, and after king d7, getting the king off the e-file so there are no checks, and after b5, the phenomenal move, rook d6 check. The pawn on e2 is immune because the king takes rook e6 check, wins the queen. So instead, the king is forced away, and after rook g6, well, now it's all over. Black is finally going to promote a pawn.
Things were getting nutty there, and I almost took off my clothes as you were describing that sequence. It was amazing, so hot in there in that ulti box. But really, these little princesses looking to become queens themselves were too much for the first lady on the board. And one of the things that I found so fascinating about this position, Robert, is that in the beginning, not only do the computers still think the position is just fine for white here, which they might have been right if, as you said, Elyanov recognizes he needs to stay on the light squares, but a few moves later, the computers still think this position was zeros. They'll throw up zeros here. If you don't believe me, pick your poison and turn on your favorite evil AI interface, whether it be Komodo or Stockfish or any of the others. But you'll see that the horizon effect existed. It was in play. It's always nice to see when grandmasters of the highest level show us just every once in a while where the computers may not see the bigger picture, and that's what Li Chiao proved here with the move of the week with E2, and then as you said, I'll make a third candidate. Rook E6 is brilliant, and then King D7, getting the king away from checks, showing everybody just how powerful these pawns and rooks can be, and for that, the Chinese took our move of the week and had a pretty decent Altibox Norway Chess Super Tournament. He's back home to bring us the chess facts, not the chess fiction, Mike. Put the books away and try to explain to the fans how and why Nazi Bakidze was featured on Late Night with Seth Meyers after winning the U.S. Women's Championship.
It's a good question, Danny. As you might expect, it was all about her name, and you pronounced it well. It is Nazi, not the other pronunciation of the same word. The name actually means gentle in her native Georgian, and when Seth Meyers had a little joke at her expense, she was the first person to post it on her social channels, so good on her for having a little joke about it. Here's that clip.
A woman named Nazi yesterday won the 2016 U.S. Chess Championship. Apparently, she claimed the title after a woman named France just gave up. World War II joke of the day. Still fresh.
And now, Danny, back to real chess. Wei Yi is now the two-time champion of China. He just won the Chinese championship for the second year in a row with the exact same score as last year, 7.5 out of 11. This year, however, it was undefeated. However, he didn't have all the strong competition he had last year. Last year, he had to beat the likes of Yu Yangyi, Wang Hao, Ding Liren. This year, I was looking up and down the roster, and I couldn't really find anybody above the low 2600s. This would be a little bit like Caruana playing in the U.S. Championship without Kamsky, Nakamura, So, or Onishuk. So a bit of a coronation, but congratulations to Wei Yi, another triumph.
Well, I think even with the weaker competition, we can still safely say that Wei Yi is the brightest star coming out of China and that his future may require shades. Speaking of bright futures, we have Nihal Sarin playing in the Hasselbacken Open, not the Hasselhoff Open, as I want to call it so desperately. But explain to everybody why this event might be interesting to follow over the next couple weeks as we're in a bit of a dry spell from major over-the-board tournaments taking place.
That's right, Danny. I believe the Hasselhoff Open would be in Austria, but the Hasselbacken Open is in the beautiful archipelago of Stockholm. And one of the reasons this tournament's worthy of following is because you've got a great mix of longtime veterans and juniors that are really just scratching the surface of big-time tournaments. So amongst the veteran players, we've got the likes of Almashi, we've got Alexei Shirov, we've got Dmitry Andrikin. And amongst the youngsters, well, you've already said Nihal Sarin, the 11-year-old FM from India. That would be Sarin, not Sauron. That's Nakamura's pet nickname for his nemesis, Carlsen. We've also got Jordan van Verriest. Apologies to my colleague Peter Doggers for my pronunciation, the young Dutch GM. We've also got Sam Sevian, who might still be the youngest GM in the world. I'm not sure if anybody has eclipsed that record. So I'm going to be interested to see over the next two-thirds of the tournament who comes out better, the juniors or the veterans.
Well, and for those looking to follow the games, they can find out information at chess.com/news. But the really big events in May, of course, are all taking place on chess.com. We know those to be the Grandmaster Blitz Battle championship matches. But before we let you go, we want to look ahead to the biggest match of the year. That will be the World Championship in November, and allow you to elaborate on some of the things that Karyakin revealed in an interview about his training methods and how he's preparing for the match.
Danny, a fantastic interview was done by an online Russian publication where we'll hear about Karyakin, how he prepares for big tournaments. First of all, he loves to go to the Middle East. Why? Because he enjoys swimming and beach volleyball. Good luck finding those things in New York City in November. He better go indoors for that. We also find out that he only has himself one glass of wine, and usually that's not until the tournament's over. So a real ascetic when it comes to his training. He believes that physical conditioning is super important. He takes it quite seriously. So we'll see if he comes to New York City early and trains there, or if he flies in at the last minute for the match. I'm going to be curious to see how this all unfolds.
Well, maybe he'll get lucky and there'll be a gym nearby that offers those amenities. We get lucky every time we have you on Other News. We'll actually see you sooner than we normally do for Time Trouble, because we also are covering the best and worst moments from the month of April where you are sitting in. I hope you're ready to take a look back at April, and I will see you in just a few moments, my friend.
Can't get enough, Danny. Thanks.
Well, Sean, here's what everyone's talking about this week. An interesting interview was published by Daniel Roberts, who writes for the Yahoo Finance Sportsbook, when he interviewed Grandmaster Maurice Ashley about the state of basically money in chess. Are our top athletes, quote unquote, being paid what they're worth when compared to the top athletes in other sports? I think we already know the answer to that. And if not, what's the solution? Sean, I'm going to kick it to you and just let you give your opinion on this in general. I think it's a really interesting topic. We appreciate the love chess gets, and Maurice definitely looked good in the interview. But is it really that accurate to say that chess players are underpaid? And if so, what would you do to change it? Go ahead and give your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's completely fair to say that chess players are underpaid. Magnus Carlsen is making an estimated $4 million a year. I could easily see him be making $20 million a year for the level of athlete or a competitor that he is. And then we have guys like Nakamura as well, who have managed to wrangle themselves a Red Bull sponsorship and, of course, are coming off Chess.com. That is to say, though, that while they're underpaid, I feel, in comparison to the rest of the competitors in mainstream media and that we see on a day-to-day basis, I think the trend is actually moving up and that we're headed in the right direction. You know, Magnus Carlsen, being a bad boy and as somewhat of a sex symbol, is making more money as a chess professional than anyone before there, even more than Bobby Fischer.
Yeah, I think you make great points. So you're kind of arguing both, right? Yes, we kind of all agree that they're underpaid, but given the current evaluation of this market, it does seem to be trending the right direction, right? One of the other interesting angles, though, Sean, I'm going to bring up now that happened and grew out of this initial interview by Dan Roberts with Maurice is this number that keeps getting thrown around. 605 million people play chess, quote unquote. And this was a research project that was done, but then never really published, probably because of the lack of concrete data to back it up. Are we counting everyone who's just ever seen a chessboard, or do they actually know how to play? And most importantly, are they a marketable, monetizable audience, right? I would argue 605 million is a little inflated, and as you can see from this conversation here, Chess Vibes interacted with Daniel Roberts and kind of said the same thing. So what's your thought about that? If you're arguing that the players are worth more, then you have to prove that with the market. If there isn't enough people to watch it, how can you justify saying Magnus Carlsen is worth 20 million a year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 605 million number, I think it was meant to be a ballpark guesstimate anyway of just the people who know the rules of chess, but it certainly doesn't map onto the kind of demographic that you might see watching your program. That being said, I think the number that really speaks to the marketability of chess is the amount of people who are watching the World Championship in India with Vishy Anand versus Magnus Carlsen. This breached 100 million. And to give you sort of a touch point for that, that's like a Super Bowl. So we should really be able to take this kind of viewership and leverage it to get more advertising dollars. And I think that's something that we're going to have to work hard as representatives or as players of chess.
Of course, it's a little bit unfair to compare to the Super Bowl because that's a single-day event, getting comparable numbers versus a 2-3 week long, sort of marathon. But it does show that the viewership is there. I'd be curious to hear what people think about it. Please leave your comments here in the chat here on Chess.com. If you're watching the video on YouTube or wherever you're finding this conversation, let us know what you think about the marketability of chess. We thank Dan Roberts for giving the love to chess. Maurice, great interview. And that was our social channel chatter for this week. Well, considering the fact that he writes half of the reports that cover all of these events and happenings during our months and busy times at chess.com/news, we think he should be able to handle himself as we look back at the month of April. Mike, are you ready?
Spoiler alert, I'm the best of April. Let's do it, Danny.
All right, we'll lead us off with number 5.
At number 5, the return of the legend Garry Kasparov. After retiring 11 years ago, we got to see him in his first multiplayer event since then. Some of the moves were still there, but there was a little bit of rust. What I loved, though, was seeing those facial expressions after wins and losses. They are classic.
Well, he impressed me with his play, I have to admit it. Sportsmanship was also the name of the game in St. Louis, with Nazi Bakizi showing great empathy for denying Tatev Abrahamyan her first U.S. Women's Championship. And then Hikaru Nakamura let the legend himself take a move back, basically, after almost hitting the clock with a horrible blunder, another night move blunder. So sportsmanship was awesome, and for that, we're giving St. Louis number 4.
It's a good one. At number 3, the Blitz battle opener between Aronian and Grishuk, narrowly won by the latter player. And if this is portending the several months of action we have to come, it's going to be great. This was only a 4 versus 5 matchup. We haven't even gotten to Fabiano or to Hikaru or to Magnus. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome, and people got to tune into Chess.com TV this week. Magnus Carlsen won in Norway, finally winning the Altibox Norway's chess super tournament, but he also dominated the Blitz, so for it, he's getting our number 2 recognition for the best things that happened in the month of April.
That's a good one, Danny, but it took him 4 tries to win. At number 1 is Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana. On his first try, he won at the U.S. Championship. He also achieved the number 2 live world rating and basically was not worse at all, except for maybe one move against Kamsky in the penultimate round. So for a great 2 weeks of chess, Fabiano is our best of April.
Unfortunately, most young Padawans these days seem to stray to the dark side, Mike, and we have to cover the bad things that happened in the month of April. You ready for this?
Let's do it, Danny.
All right, well, sadly, I'm going to give the number 5th spot to myself and to all of us at Chess.com for really just dropping the ball. Delivering on all technical fronts is something we did not do for April's Title Tuesday, but we're making it up to everybody with double the prizes in May. In fact, by the time you're watching this, probably somebody has already taken home the better part of $4,000 in cash prizes. So the 5th worst thing that happened was Chess.com for not delivering, but maybe that'll be one of the best things that happens in May.
Wow, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward Title Tuesday, apparently. In number 4, we're giving it to Levan Aronian for not preparing at all in Bullet before his Blitz battle. He said he'd never played a Bullet game before in his life. Not sure if we believe him, but if we did, then that's not great preparation. That's about half of the event as far as total number of games. So number 4 goes to Levan and his lack of Bullet prep.
Well, especially because it was probably the only reason he lost the match in the end, with them being tied with only a few minutes left. Speaking of losing matches, Garry Kasparov, well, he impressed all of us, and we were so happy to have him back, but it seemed that all of his lost games at the Ultimate Blitz event had one thing in common. They involved bad pony play, and that's a pun that if you look up pony play, you'll know that it's almost always bad. So Kasparov takes our 3rd spot for the worst things that happened in the month of April.
And number 2 was the Altibox Norway tournament. Why would we give it to them for fielding such strong competition? Well, at the end of the day, they only had a 33% decisive games rate. That's not so great. If you want to see wins and losses, get yourself to Title Tuesday or to the Blitz battles, where we can almost guarantee a 75% win rate. I don't know how they did that, especially with a niche in the field.
Yeah, 15 out of 45. 15 out of 45 decisive games is not enough. I'll tell you what else isn't enough. Not having Sergei Karyakin there and having him drop out at the last minute. Maybe a little bit of revenge for the fact that the Norway organizers did not invite him back after he won the inaugural event. Those who've been around for a few years may remember. But still, Sergei, we weren't happy that you did this. We wanted to see the preview of what's going to happen in November. And for that, you get our worst moment for the month of April.
Sorry, Sergey.
Well, Robert, Kasparov's nightmares came to life in St. Louis, and this time it had nothing to do with Putin riding a bear shirtless. It had everything to do with his poor pony play. Tell everybody the move he played here that was just an inexplicable one-move blunder against Wesley So, and then lead us into the Nakamura game where he failed on a chance to beat the American and maybe even win the entire Ultimate Blitz Showdown.
Yeah, in this first matchup against Wesley So, black is a dominating position. It couldn't get any better. You're up a pawn, your pieces look very nice, you control the c-file, but here he makes a clunker of a move with knight c3. The knight, attacks the rook with one move, but the simple rook c1 picks up that knight for free. So an inexplicable blunder, just losing on the spot, and that's just part 1 of a 2-part nightmare here, because as we get into the game against Hikaru Nakamura, he made this another bad knight move with knight f6. because knight f6 allowed knight c6 check, picking up the rook on d8. And after that, I mean, instead of taking back on d8, he makes another blunder by going rook d5, missing knight takes f7, which actually helps the knights protect each other through e5. So that was a huge blunder. Instead of this first move, knight f6 here, he should have made a fantastic move, rook takes e5. And the idea after rook takes e5 is knight takes e5, keeping d7 protected, rook a8. You swing the rook to the open file, threatening checkmate. Rook c1's forced, and after b3 and b2 coming, well, the game is completely over.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to see this subtle rook a8 move, but can't really make excuses for the former world champion. He is still the greatest chess player of all time in my mind, and White's mating net is pretty obvious when you see the knight and pawn working really well over here together to keep the white king in a cage. So though the great 13th world champion impressed so many people with his play in St. Louis at the Ultimate Blitz event. He really did. It was phenomenal. One of the most exciting chess events to cover. If you didn't watch it, clearly a you problem. But he's still taking our blunder of the week for his poor pony play. Referred to himself after one loss as Morphy versus Amateur, where he was the amateur. Of course, that being a game we didn't get to cover here. But I encourage everybody to check out the news reports, see everything that happened in his games against Wesley So, Fabiano Caruana, and Hikaru Nakamura. Caspi, we're giving you the blunder of the week, but it was great to have you back. All good things must come to an end, Mikey, and eventually you're going to run out of time. Are you ready?
Light the fuse, Danny.
Are we ever going to see the chess commentary teams stop mentioning that America's young grandmasters were originally born in other countries?
Probably not. Nakamura moved here when he was 6 months old. Crush learned on the plane while immigrating. Fabiano was born in Miami. I think that's still in the U.S. I think until we get a Cherokee Grandmaster, we're always going to hear it. We're a melting pot, though. Now, at the U.S. Championship, Fabiano was the only one to visit the confessional booth more than once. How do we get more people in there?
I'm thinking some snacks, maybe some Cheetos and some Gardettos. I'd live in there. Now, are we really surprised that Garry Kasparov is still the biggest draw for the chess world, even while Magnus Carlsen is dominating in Norway?
I'm not surprised. You give Michael Jordan a 10-day contract, you're going to fill up the arena faster than even Steph Curry could. Now, in light of recent results at the showdown in St. Louis, the candidates, and at the U.S. Championship, does Caruana have Nakamura's number in the same way that Carlsen does?
I don't know. I think recent results obviously suggest the trend, but there doesn't seem to be the same psychological block that Nakamura has shown that he clearly has against Magnus. Now, chess was recently featured in The New Yorker, an article write-up about the U.S. Championship and St. Louis. That's great, but does anybody even read The New Yorker?
Every week, Danny. And lastly, the FIDE has announced that in the Grand Prix events, players are now supposed to bring their own sponsor. You think there's any chance we can get Chess.com to pony up to get you to play?
I think they'd lock the door faster than you would if zombies were approaching. Mike, there may be zombies approaching right now, but at least we got one great episode of ChessCenter in before it's all said and done. Thank you for joining me, my man, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Danny.